uh, in your week 16 folder. So you already have access to this PowerPoint here. Okay. So the structure of the exam. It is, as we talked about, an essay exam with an intro, body, and conclusion. Right? It will be available from May 18th to May 25th. You have any time to upload and complete the short essay at any point in that week. Right? Don't forget that when you are using in-text citation, you will quote the line numbers, and the line numbers are counted off by 5 on the original document. Right? And then your essay must respond to a question that you'll be able to see starting tomorrow, but tonight at 12:01 a.m. Right? So, one of the things that this is meant to do, and why the department does a final exam in this way, is to test to make sure that all students are kind of learning the basics of close reading. So one of the things that I strongly suggest you could do is make sure you break your prep for this exam into smaller tasks. As always, make sure you read the poem before starting to write on it. You'll be surprised how many students try and do it at the same time, and that's madness, and I would strongly advise against that. Next, make sure that you annotate the poem and then look for symbols and metaphors, which are discussed in the second PowerPoint that you find in the exam materials folder in the last week of the semester. As always, just general finals week suggestions. Make sure that you try and keep somewhat of a clear head. Make sure that you're eating right, make sure that you're drinking water, make sure that you're not totally surviving on just coffee. In the finals, you may use the PowerPoints and videos that you find in the folder. All right, you'll obviously use the poem, the Auden poem, and plan when you're going to complete the exam. As always, remember you have at any point from the 18th to the 25th to complete it. So, you can pick the day that works best within your total exam schedule for all your other classes, and you can figure out when in that 18th to 25th you can work to complete the final exam. So, before you take the exam, the main thing is please read the question. Remember, where I showed you just a moment ago, the final exam question will appear there. So this isn't just an exam where it's like write whatever you think. You have to answer the question that is given to you. So before you start writing the final exam, make sure that you not only have read the poem, but make sure that you have read the question you're being asked. Right? Pay special attention to the key words. Are you going to have to defend a concept? Are you going to have to explain something? Are you going to have to make a connection? These are keywords in exam questions. After you feel that you understand the question being asked to you and you have read it at least twice, make sure that your thesis statement in your essay is the answer to the question. Right? So that is your thesis statement. Your thesis statement will be, here is my answer to the question I'm being asked about Auden's poem. Next, it's always good to make sure you have a plan and an outline of where you're going to go. You can use the structure found in the other essay about content that we'll talk about. And next, do not use anybody else's ideas but yours. You will take this exam using only the poem and the information on the PowerPoints. All right, if you try and go and use the internet in this final exam, it can result in getting an F for the exam. It's just you, your ideas, and the help that I put up with the PowerPoints and the videos. So, the main thing as you read the poem that I want you to look for are symbols and metaphors. All right, we've talked about this, throughout the semester. We've talked about the way that at the very beginning, the plays used symbols, like in Stash, the major symbols of the father's genitals, that always are used to represent more than just the thing that it is. And then metaphors we've studied throughout the semester. All of our authors have used metaphors, whether it's Quran using metaphors of a nation not being able to have children to talk about current socio-political issues, the metaphor of Brass as how you should live your life, how you should be successful. You've used both of these concepts and discussed them throughout the semester. And as this says, I don't want to see you use this definition in the assignment. We all know what a symbol and a metaphor is. You just have to explain to me what the symbol and metaphor is in the poem that you've read. So, to successfully complete this essay, you really only need 4 paragraphs. Right? You really only need an introduction, 2 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. That's it. So this is not some 15-page assignment. It's really brief. All right, you're only writing about 1 poem. So what I want you to do is do 4 paragraphs. Introduction, 2 body paragraphs, conclusion, then you're done. So in your introduction, right, you have 2 jobs. 1, briefly summarize and introduce the poem. Don't forget to mention the title of the poem and the author's name. Right. Next, the last sentence of your introduction should be your thesis statement, where you answer the question in the prompt. Remember, your thesis statement, the last sentence of your introduction, will answer the question, the final exam question. That's what it must do. Finally, in your introduction, never rephrase the question. All right? Anytime, give you a bit of advice. Anytime a student rephrases the question, your professor will think that you don't know what you're doing, that you're wasting time. So you just have to answer the question that you receive in the prompt. That's it in your introduction. This would be your first paragraph of your response. Next, 2 body paragraphs. Right? I need 2 body paragraphs where you explain to me a symbol or metaphor from the poem. 1 for each paragraph. Right? If you have done some of the smaller critical review stuff that we did for the poems and the essays, this structure of what you have to do is nothing that's a surprise to you. You've done this before. That's by design. I don't want students to not understand what they're going to do for the final exam. So your 2 body paragraphs uses 1 piece of evidence from the poem, 1 piece of evidence per paragraph. You're giving it to me twice, and I specifically want you to use that evidence to explain a symbol or a metaphor. Okay? Remember, rule of ones for a paragraph. One symbol, one metaphor per paragraph, one piece of evidence that explains that symbol or metaphor. That's it. And don't forget, as you introduce the evidence from the poem, to follow our three-step process where you introduce it, you quote it, and then explain why it's important and how it proves your thesis statement, just like we've been doing for evidence for the entire year. Right. So, introduction, 2 body paragraphs. No more than 2. I just want you to show me 2 that you can do correctly. One symbol or metaphor per paragraph, one for each, that you then support and explain with one piece of evidence per paragraph. And finally, the conclusion. The conclusion asks you to explain how the poem proves your thesis statement. Then the department wants to see you explain how the poem relates in any way to something you've read or watched in English 111. Now, this class is in luck because you get to write about the poem W.H. Auden. If you look at the introduction to poetry and you look at the very beginning of our unit on poetry with Jackson's poems, remember there's an Auden poem that we've already read this semester because Jackson uses it. So you guys are in luck. You'll have a very easy connection. So don't forget that. But in the conclusion, you have 2 jobs. Explain to me how the poem proves your answer in your thesis statement. Then explain to me how the poem relates to something you have read or watched in English 111. All right. So we have introduction, body, 2 body paragraphs, and conclusion. That's it. 4 paragraphs. Read it over, revise it, make sure you've answered the question, and then submit it. Okay, so it's not a huge exam. All right. And in a second, we'll talk a bit about the content of the poem. All right. This is just the structure. This PowerPoint is already available to you. And then I'll link the recording as well. All right. So just remember, make sure you study the poem, reread the poem at least twice, study the PowerPoints, including this one, and rewatch the videos that will be up today that walk you through it. As you read the poem, make sure you look for one symbol and one metaphor you can explain. Understand that the essay you write will be an answer to a question. So there's no reason to start writing your essay today because you don't know the question. All right? That is something completely important. You have to make sure that your essay answers the question. And then the conclusion, you will talk about how the poem connects to something that you've read this semester. All right? You will have 4 body paragraphs, introduction, 2 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. All right? Don't write more than 4 body paragraphs.